So thank you everyone for joining this webinar today. Hello, bonjour, buenos dias, greetings from wherever in the world you're joining us today. My name is James Milner. I have the real privilege of being the program director for LEARN, the Local Engagement Refugee Research Network. This is a partnership between researchers, civil society partners, and refugee leaders in Canada and many parts of the world, but really driven by the priorities identified by our partners in East Africa and the Middle East. Through research, training, capacity building, policy engagement, and public dialogue, we're working to better understand and enhance the role of civil society in the functioning of the refugee regime. And it's in this context that we're delighted to partner with Canada's International Development Research Centre, IDRC, and their network of research chairs, of whom there'll be 4 participating in today's webinar, to collaborate to amplify the perspectives of those most affected by displacement in contributing to both research and policy discussions and advocacy efforts to find more just and reliable solutions. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which I live and work is the traditional unceded land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I say that not only out of respect and protocol and a recognition of my status as a guest on this unceded land, but also out of recognition that these issues of dispossession and dislocation that we'll be discussing in the webinar today are very much a part of the history of the land on which I live and work. And with that, it really is such a pleasure to welcome all of you, more than 100 registrants for this webinar, joining from 4 different continents and across time zones. Thank you very much for joining us today for this 3rd webinar in the series organized by the IDRC Research Chairs on Forced Displacement in partnership with LEARN. Before we begin, let me just share some practicalities with you to get us started. First of all, please note that the webinar is in the view-only format. So please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to pose questions, which I will curate and moderate in the second half of the webinar today. Please be respectful in the language that you use when posing a question and respect the views of others. Inappropriate behavior or language will lead to your removal from the webinar today. Third, if you have any technical issues during the webinar, please send us an email to learn@carleton.ca. Appears down there on the screen and we'll help you out. And also, please join the conversation on social media, on the platform formerly known as Twitter, by tagging either Learning, @Learning, or FDChairsNet. The tags are there. And finally, please note that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted on the website of the IDRC Research Chairs in the coming weeks, along with a summary and a policy brief that comes from these views. So please keep an eye on the website that's posted there. So we hope you enjoy this webinar, and we really do thank you for joining. I'm very excited about this webinar. I know that I'm going to learn a lot in the conversation on Global South perspectives on internally displaced persons, IDPs, especially with views from Lebanon, Gaza, Mexico, and Ethiopia. The webinar comes at a time when displacement levels continue to climb, and geopolitics makes the challenge of cooperation, protection, and solutions more challenging than ever. So in these challenging times, it's especially important to remember the norms, the principles, the commitments, and the rights that have been achieved over the years, especially in the context of those who are displaced within their own countries and don't benefit from protection from crossing a border. It's now been more than 3 decades since the adoption of the guiding principles on internal displacement, and we've seen some progress in the recognition of the scale of this global challenge. Remember that of the 120 million people who are displaced in the world today, the vast majority of these people are displaced within their own country. And advocating for the rights of IDPs, finding solutions for displacement, and supporting the advocacy and innovation of efforts led by those themselves who have been displaced are imperatives that we all share. So in today's webinar, we want to look more specifically at dimensions of internal displacement as illustrated by recent dynamics of displacement in Ethiopia, Gaza, Lebanon, and Mexico. It's an opportunity to consider both current dynamics of internal displacement and to recognize and reflect upon the value of foregrounding our responses in the expertise and the experience of those most affected by displacement. We're very privileged to have with us today 5 speakers to reflect on these questions. Each will provide some opening comments of about 8 to 10 minutes before we turn to a discussion between our presenters and engage with questions from you, the audience. So to begin, we're absolutely thrilled to be joined by Paula Gaviria Betancur, the UN Special Rapporteur on the human rights of internally displaced persons since November 2022. Her full bio is posted there online, but let me just say that for those of you who don't know Paula, she is a fierce champion for human rights, especially in context of forced displacement. A remarkable champion for the rights of IDPs, not only with her work in Colombia, but globally. And we're really thrilled, Paula, to have you with us today. So let's begin, Paula, with your thoughts on if you can give us a sense on the context within which we're having this conversation today. Paula, over to you.
Thank you, James, very much. And thank you, LERRN and the IDRC Research Chairs network on forced displacement for this invitation. I'm really, really thrilled. I am very happy to be here and look forward for this discussion that you framed very well. I think it's important maybe for those who don't know what the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on the human rights of internally displaced persons is about, to share a little bit of that. So I just want to say that the mandate was established 33 years ago in 1992. There have been 4 mandate holders before me. And as you may recall, you mentioned the guiding principles. They state that internally displaced persons, and we have this acronym that I don't like, but we use all the time, the IDPs, are persons or group of persons who have been forced or obliged to flee or to leave their homes or places of habitual residence, in particular as a result of or in order to avoid the effects of armed conflicts, situations of generalized violence, violations of human rights, or natural or human-made disasters, and who have not, as you mentioned, crossed an international recognized border. So they remain within their countries and do not cross an international border. And as a crucial element of sovereignty, it is the governments of the states where internally displaced persons are found that have the primary responsibility for their assistance and protection. No international protection regime is required here because it's their obligation. And international community's role is complementary here, very important, but complementary. So here the principle of sovereignty as responsibility enshrined in the United Nations Charter is reiterated in numerous international instruments. And this principle, I have to say, is the foundational basis, I would say, for the guiding principles. The 30 guiding principles restate the most relevant binding norms of international human rights law, humanitarian law, and refugee law by analogy, and they codify and make explicit guarantees protecting internally displaced persons that are inherent in these bodies of law. And as you say, this year is the 27th anniversary of these important guidelines. National responsibility entails preventing arbitrary displacement and the conditions that lead to displacement, taking measures to assist to protect the rights of people in displacement, and fostering conditions for the internally displaced persons to find durable solutions to internal displacement, because as we found in the high-level panel, the vast majority of the internally displaced persons stay in a protracted situation of displacement for generations. At the international level, no single agency, as we know, or organization has been designated as the global lead on protection and assistance of internally displaced persons. Rather, all agencies are called upon to cooperate with each other to help address these needs in a collaborative manner. I report as a mandate holder annually to both the Human Rights Council, the General Assembly, and I advise on internal displacement globally through country visits, reports, press releases, letters, and other activities. You might know UN Special Rapporteurs are independent experts, not UN staff. We are unpaid. We get support from OHCHR mainly, but we are non-UN staff. And as UN Special Rapporteur on the human rights of IDPs, my responsibilities include strengthening the international response to internal displacement, mainstreaming human rights of IDPs throughout the UN system, international advocacy and action to improving protection and respect for the human rights of internally displaced persons, and enhancing dialogue with governments, intergovernmental, regional, non-governmental organizations, and other relevant actors. And in addition to these formal responsibilities, I would share with you that I am part, or I lead other senior level groups like the Interagency Standing Committee. I'm part of that forum, which is the forum of the UN and non-UN humanitarian partners that aims to improve the delivery of humanitarian assistance to affected populations. Also, I co-lead with UNHCR and the support of the Global Protection Cluster, an independent protection expert group of former mandate holders and eminent experts on IDP protection that engages with countries, with UN leadership to improve the protection of IDPs. And lastly, I recently joined the Solutions Champion, which is a structure that emerged from the work of the UN Office of the Special Advisor on Solutions to Internal Displacement, where we intend with UNHCR, IOM, UNDP, the IDRC, and the Assistant Secretary General of PBSO to be a vehicle for high-level advocacy and to keep the momentum around the importance of solutions for IDPs. My thematic priorities for the current term, which is a 3-year term, as I presented in my first report to the Human Rights Council, are climate change and internal displacement. I already presented a report on this topic, concretely related to planned relocations in the context of disasters and the adverse effects of climate change, after consultations with experts and other stakeholders. The other issue is peace processes, peace agreements, peace building, and internal displacement. Presented also my report to the General Assembly past October. The other topic is internal displacement resulting from generalized violence, and I'm going to present my next report to the Human Rights Council this June on the particular issue of internal displacement in the context of organized criminal activity, which is an increasing driver of displacement around the world, particularly in the Americas and some parts of Africa as well. And the last and very important topic is the integration and reintegration of the internally displaced persons. And I will present my last report of this term to the General Assembly next October on the reintegration, integration of internally displaced persons, focusing mainly on urban areas, analyzing the cross-cutting issue of urbanization. All of these thematics, in my perspective, relate to the issue of prevention, which we have seen, and we saw it in the high-level panel, is a topic that is less talked about, less work. There's less work on that, less research, and we think it's an overarching priority where more work and protection and policies are needed. All of these thematics are also directly linked to challenges of governance, development, human rights, peace, and closely interconnected to realities of climate change, urbanization, fragility, and violence, as I mentioned. And as you mentioned, I think I am a very positive person. I like to see things from the positive side. And I started this year, and I think we all started this year with a significant momentum on at least on the issue of durable solutions to internal displacement after the work of the Special Advisor on Solutions to Internal Displacement 2 years mandate that finished in December 2024. and in my perspective, achieved an unprecedented mobilization inside and outside the UN system to support durable solutions for internally displaced people. There is now in the UN a wide approach, a system-wide approach to internal displacement with structures, with guidance, concrete commitments to support this approach. We said it at the high-level panel that the UN wasn't fit for purpose to respond to this protractedness of the crisis of displacement. Now the UN is more fit for that. It's also working more closely with the IFIs, with the development actors that needed to be more involved in the solutions for displacement, directly working with countries that have committed to overcome these situations and bring solutions. There's an advisory group of IDPs that we met, James, in Montreal when we did this webinar, this seminar, which is very important to influence global policies and processes. But obviously, we have to be realistic. And despite this progress, the world is facing an unprecedented global crisis of internal displacement and unprecedented levels of human suffering. New this year, we have the DRC situation, for example, that arose. I had my last country, there was a working visit to the DRC, and I was shocked to see all the destruction and everything that's happening now in the East Congo, adding to all the other contexts that we all are very aware of. Immense challenges for humanitarian and development aid, protection and human rights respects, and for the international law, and as you mentioned, multilateralism. The recent US government freeze on foreign assistance affects the whole global aid system and has already resulted in massive humanitarian staff cuts, and we can envision, and we are envisioning now, an increase in negative protection impacts and risks. So we must urgently make internal displacement, again, more visible. We must act collectively to prevent arbitrary displacement, to protect the human rights of the internally displaced persons, and to provide a humanitarian and development assistance that opens the avenues for this durable solution. So the changing landscape that was built in this past 2 years, I think it's an opportunity to do better and to transform the response. But we need to maintain our principles and aim to a win-win where we can create these solutions for the IDPs, the local communities, and the authorities. Finally, I would like just to make a call. We'll have more time at the end, but just a call to join forces for stronger collaboration. I think with the experience with the network that you have here and the capacity and everyone that's joining this webinar, I would just wish to invite you to support the mandates work, the public advocacy efforts that we do through information, through contacts, through networks, through speaking opportunities like this one. It's very important for us. And also, I welcome your submissions to my upcoming reports on the 2 topics that I shared. And I'm sure that the conversation today is going to bring a lot of good inputs for that. So thank you again. And I very look forward to the exchanges today. Thank you, James, and everyone.
Thank you so much, Paula, for that. With that overview, it's clear your passion and your positivity, as you mentioned, but also the complexity, not only of the various pieces that come together in thinking about internal displacement, but how internal displacement is nested within so many other, mega trends, urbanization, climate change, all of these other factors, and that call for solidarity and connection, especially during this time of difficult geopolitics. I note in the audience that we have many of the colleagues who were at that workshop at McGill in December. I note, that Megan Bradley and Jennifer Welch and members of the experts group are on the call. So this is part of a broader global community. And I think, the perspective of those working in countries most affected by internal displacement have this wealth of expertise to share. And so now I'm really delighted to turn to 4 of the IDRC research chairs on forced displacement who work in various contexts engaging with internal displacement. You mentioned the challenge of reintegration post-displacement. This has been a real focus of concern for Abebaw, Minaye, and colleagues at Addis Ababa University with the situation in Ethiopia. So, Abebaw, let's turn to you now. Abebaw's full bio is going to be posted in the chat box in a moment. But let me just say that Abebaw is the IDRC Research Chair in Forced Displacement at Addis Ababa University, with strong backgrounds in social psychology and conducting field work as we speak in areas affected by displacement in Ethiopia. So, Abebaw, over to you. What are the lessons from the Ethiopian experience that contribute to this conversation? Go ahead, please, Abebaw.
Thank you so much, James. Thank you for this opportunity. I think the key issues in the Eastern Horn of Africa and Ethiopia is there are good initiatives at initiative level. While given the magnitude of the problem, where we are in a relatively so volatile region, where we have about 19 million IDPs, you know, the case of Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia, South Sudan, you name it. There are good initiatives, including the Kampala Convention of 2009, and Ethiopia has ratified that, although the domestication is still not achieved. There are good national initiatives aligned with the global exercise, including the guiding principles, the IACC framework, and the solutions agenda. Ethiopia is one of the pilot countries, the 15 pilot countries, and associated to that, Ethiopia has initiated durable solutions initiative in 2019, based on those two frames. And regions are found to be more active in this regard, like the Somali region, for example, is doing a tremendous work in making it part of the plan. For example, it has a plan from a 5-year growth plan, and it has incorporated resilience and durable solutions to IDP within this framework. Apart from that, durable solutions working groups are established at national as well as regional levels. Those regions that are most impacted have established that. But the national level is not as strong as the regional level. And recently, in November 2024, durable solution strategies developed in Ethiopia with the support of UNDP, IOM, and UNHCR, 3 of them, with a priority. I'm happy that they have made the #1 priority is resolving conflict and preventing new displacements. Unfortunately, that happening in the ground is another story, but at least this is 3 months or 4 months or so. But identifying the root cause is so crucial, and globally one of the issues is peace is not given the attention that it needs in the HDP nexus. So prioritizing prevention of conflict and other problems like disaster and climate problems is a good initiative. And at community level also, given Ethiopia has about 4.2 million IDPs, without including IDP returns, you guys know very well that when you return your home, the home is not the same. But even the 4.2 million challenge, there is a relatively good exercise in the host communities, well, partly because of social connections. There are, the local community is, with its very limited resource, trying to be helpful and willing to work with the IDPs and to mobilize resources. So since the Kampala Convention in the last 16 years, there are good initiatives, and yet there are a lot of challenges remaining. Particularly the internal politics in Ethiopia is so tough, so I better say rough, that even we have very limited agreement on the situation of IDPs as it gets politicized among different groups. And we don't have really a solid figure. Government has even requested that nobody should use any figure from different agencies until I produce, and yet it's not capable in producing that, or it's not able yet to have a very solid data. So data remains to be one big challenge, and diverse interests by federal, regional, and different groups is still making, the possibility of working for durable solutions challenging, including the very, not having a solid figure. You cannot pledge, you cannot ask, I want this kind of support for this number of people. And this is a big challenge. And lack of mandated institution, although there is that good initiative of, having this strategy, newly developed strategy, and the prospect for a proclamation, not yet approved, for about 5 years. There is no mandated organization. At times, there was the Ethiopia Disaster and Risk Management Commission, but it would say, my role is more of humanitarian assistance. And at some point, the Peace Ministry was more active because we're resolving the conflict, and the return is, one of the critical durable solution. But that ministry, there is turnover of individuals and a clear mandate, and the coordinating body is missing. On top of that, institutional capacity and including commitments are very limited. And I think associating it to the global or the international community also, there is a relatively good focus for humanitarian support, although the current geopolitics is, I could not say declining humanitarian assistance, I would say kind of shutdown of many of the global humanitarian exercise. So the peace element is not given sufficient attention. I think this may be partly because of the need not to interfere. But there are also times in which there is interference. So the peace process is not going in a way we want. Ethiopia has set a national dialogue commission, which is very good, but there is a limitation on public trust. And we have also said transitional justice system is being implemented, but is not as functional as it is intended given the level of the problem. Maintaining peace agreements, including the Pretoria Agreement, is becoming a challenge for Ethiopia. And informal leaders and actors, including different warring factions in different regions, is making the possibility of, or the achievement of durable solutions a bit tough. So, as future direction, only to note 2 points. Genuine political dialogue is so critical in Ethiopia for a durable solution. And, mandate for IDP has to be clearly spelled out. These are the points I would like to raise. Thank you once again for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, James, for that introduction.
Thank you so much, Abebaw. And you know the point there about the importance of linking to again, as Paula mentioned, the connection into climate change and urbanization, the connection into peace processes and dialogue and reconciliation. All of these points create this very complex web. And so from the context of Ethiopia and the challenges there, Hiram, will come to you in the context of Mexico. Abebaw, if I can ask you to mute your microphone as we move to Hiram, thank you. Hiram Angel is the IDRC Research Chair in Forced Displacement at the University of Guadalajara. His work has been quite deep and profound in questions of returns from the United States to Mexico and displacement in the context of that, but also the experience of internal displacement in Mexico with its long-standing connection to displacement as a result of organized criminal activity, as Paula mentioned, the theme of an upcoming report of hers. So Hiram, we're very keen to hear from you. I understand you have a presentation that you'll be sharing and presenting in English. Hiram, the floor is yours, and here's your presentation. Gracias.
Thank you, James. Just remember me, I have 10 minutes, yes? Okay, thank you. Okay, hi everybody. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I would like to present an overview about the forced internal displacement in Mexico. Particularly, I want to talk about what kind of research or activities we are doing in the chair. These activities mainly is to understand and try to give good solutions or propose some solution for the forced internal displacement in Mexico. Please, the next slide. This is the content of my presentation. The first part, just I want to talk about the source of data that we can use on internally displaced persons when we are talking about this in Mexico. In the part one, just a general overview about the forced displacement numbers, particularly Paula said that's right. Particularly, this number is because in Mexico the violence situation is very complicated. So the most important displacement in this country is due to the violence in different regions of this country. In part two is about the subnational and local risk internally displaced persons in Mexico, particularly is about the things and the actions that from the chair we are trying to do to understand about more things of the displacement, internal displacement in Mexico. And finally, response of institutions. There are not more response, just are a legal response, but it's important to talk what about this legal response. And the finally conclusion. The next please slide. In general way, this is the mainly source of data in Mexico. The most important association that is give information about displacement, internal displacement in Mexico is the Mexican Commission for the Defense and the Promotion of Human Rights. Even the information that the Mexican Commission produced is used for the global internal displacement database. Other source of information is National Population Council, particularly there is an research about socio-demographic profile of the population that changing its home or place of residence to protect itself from crime. And other source is the global internal displacement, but the global internal displacement use the information from the Mexican Commission, reports from the UNICEF, or reports from the particular projects with finance from the Mexican government. In the case of the report of UNICEF or the other study, Geographies of Displacement project, there are a project with more qualitative focus. So don't use big numbers or number more representative. Just use some interviews for few people to identify what is the repercussion for the people that is moving when they are influenced for the violence or the displacement because due to the violence in their regions. And in the chair in forced migration, inclusion and human rights, Universidad of Guadalajara, IDRC, Carleton University, we are trying to use or create a new source of information or create new strategies to understand what happened with the internal displacement. So I invite you to visit our website, because you can find the methodologies that we are used to understand the internal displacement in Mexico. Particularly, we are talking about risk analysis on migratory routes and presence of criminal organization on the roads and highways of Mexico. The next, please. This is the numbers in Mexico. This number is built for the Mexican Commission. I told you the Mexican Commission have a methodology to measure the internal displacement. His methodology is through the newspapers, the news, or talking with the non-governmental organizations. So they have a record about the news in relation with the displacement. All the time they are review the news, and they are doing it from the 2006, and the last day that they recovered this information is December 2021. In this period, the numbers of the displaced in Mexico is near to 318,000 persons. This information is used at the same time for the internal displacement monitoring center. The next, please. These some numbers from the Mexican Commission is the last report. You can observe the main or the principal states of Mexico that occur the internal displays for the violence. You can observe also the principal causes of the displacement. You can observe that the one of these is the violence provoked for the cartels. Other cause is the violence for policies or for policies, or maybe for electoral conflicts in some cases. And you can observe some states, the states with more displaced is in the south of the country, and in other cases in the west of the country. The next, please. This is other the source of information is from the sociodemographic. So it's from the National Population Council. This information is from 2019. You can observe the case of the homes, so the house, the people that abandoned the hometown to live in other city. This provoked for the violence. The next, please. Sorry for my for the fast presentation, but I try to respect the time. One question is very important for us. Where is the internal displacement most frequent, rural or urban areas? urban areas. Sorry, we have two sources of information for us the Mexican Commission support the idea the internal displacement is most frequent in the rural areas, but for the other hand, the National Population Council in 2019 affirmed that the displacement is most common in the urban areas. The reality is that the information is not clear, and we have displacement in urban and rural areas at the same time. The next, please. From the share, we try to understand the displacement in Mexico. We use primary information and try to identify what happened with the people in a specific state move to other part in the country, because we are thinking in internal displacement. In this case, it's just an example about the state of Chiapas. You can observe the lines are the different reasons that the people is displaced: natural disaster, criminal, insecurity, and violence, domestic violence, and other social factors. If you use our information, you can observe in different states of the Mexican Republic what is the main reason for or cause for the people is moving. The next, please. I just have 1 minute. This map is a map about the presence of cartels in Mexico. We are thinking that this is very important for us know where is the cartels in Mexico, because if we try to overlap the information with the reasons of the displacement in Mexico with the presence of the cartels, we can have a better panoramic about what are the main reasons, and we are attend this reason with more or with other or specific public policies. The next, please. In the case of the climate change and the displacement, because the reason of the cause of the environmental change, we try to use the likes with the NASA information for specific events. For example, this research is about this studies for the case of the Otis hurricane. The person that did this is a study identify what happened with the night lights at the change, or how to change the night lights before and after a hurricane. And this is an approximation and we can use this information to understand if there is displacement or not, or no had displacement after the hurricane. And finally, the next, please. This is the response of institution. Legal response is common. The next, please. We have a migration law in national aspects. We have 3 local laws in different states of the Mexican Republic, mainly in the states with more displacement: Chiapas, Sinaloa, and Michoacán. And you can read in, sorry, this is in Spanish. This is the principal particularities of the law. And next, please. And that's all for me. I hope that this information is useful.
Muchas gracias, Hiram. Thank you for respecting the time. A lot that you have shared, and I think what really comes out are sort of these diverse motivations for displacement, right? Natural disaster overlaid with the activities of criminal organizations and the various ways that it's not as one-directional as we're often led to believe in the context of the media. And I think that's so critically important. And in the context of going beyond what we hear in media reports and understanding complexity of displacement situations more deeply, we're really privileged to have with us Professor Sawsan Abdulrahim, who's the IDRC Research Chair on Forced Displacement at the American University in Beirut. Sawsan, you'll be speaking to us about the displacement situation in Gaza and some of the depths and complexities of that case that go beyond what we hear within the headlines. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this conversation, Sawsan. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much, James. And actually, I'm very jealous. I wish that we can do some of the work that Hiram is able to do in Mexico with data that we have here in this region. Thank you so much for organizing this webinar. And what I'm going to do is actually just pose a couple of points related to the report by the Special Rapporteur on the human rights of internally displaced persons. And I want to start by just acknowledging the great effort by Paula, if you don't mind me using first name, by Paula and her predecessor, who have, basically have been working to make visible the plight of internally displaced populations in various national and international fora, and to place the rights of the internally displaced persons on the agenda of the United Nations, particularly collaborating with UNHCR and other agencies that focus predominantly on refugees. So also it's really important to focus on the human rights, on protection issues, and the search for durable solutions for IDPs. And we have to, no matter what the geopolitical context we are experiencing right now, we have to insist that durable solutions for the internally displaced persons have to be based on human rights considerations and not real estate or any other unacceptable solutions and considerations. So I have 2 points. The first point relates to the internally displaced persons versus refugees. And the other point will address something briefly related to the context, the political context in Gaza and in Palestine. So I want to start by the first point related to how the report basically acknowledges important things related to how internal displacement lies on a spectrum of forced displacement. Internal displacement is not something separate from other forms of displacement, and particularly cross-border displacement. We know that at least in the case of climate change displacement, which is one of the strategic goals of the Special Rapporteurs to work on in the coming years, we know that in that case, climate change displacement starts with internal displacement, and then over time it may become cross-border displacement. And then there is this issue about climate refugees who cross an international border and become refugees, and special populations that the UNHCR is concerned with. We also know that there's currently a lot more focus and attention on what's called stress migration that results from a mix of factors, including climate change, but also including poverty and conflict at the same time. And that can result in both internal and cross-border displacement in different settings. However, what I found in the report that it didn't progress more than, for example, the guiding principles, despite all the strengths and all the important information in the report, that still there's this basically this focus on internal displacement as something very different from cross-border displacement, and requiring a different approaches and different strategies. And very little acknowledgement of the fact that internally displaced populations and refugees may come from very similar experiences and from similar spaces, similar places, both geographically and sociopolitically as well. Also, the report, of course, highlights that internal displacement is directly connected to the challenges of governance, the challenges of human rights, achieving human rights and peace. On the other hand, and also as stipulated in the guiding principles on internal displacement, what we still find is a strong focus on governments as the entities responsible for protecting the rights of internally displaced populations within their borders. And that differs, of course, from who is responsible for protecting the rights of refugees who cross an international border. Well, of course, this is important in theory because, you know, as Paula mentioned at the beginning, sovereignty comes with responsibility, and the state is responsible for protecting the human rights of its citizens, particularly those who are displaced. Governments oftentimes are unable to provide internally displaced persons with protections. I mean, Arab governments in the Arab region are a prime example of fragile, weak states that are not able to provide these protections. But at the same time, there are cases where the governments are unwilling to provide this protection, and the governments are themselves the cause of displacement, and they have very little interest in providing human rights protections to internally displaced persons. I want to also mention an extreme case of a government who will not provide any protections to persons who are internally displaced because of government actions. And I want to turn, you know, James mentioned that I wanted to mention the case of what's going on right now in Gaza, but also in the West Bank and in Palestine in general. And to think about the situation that we have been watching on our television and telephone screens for the past 16 or 17 months. And before that, I also want to acknowledge the efforts by the Special Rapporteur on the human rights of internally displaced persons, who also worked with other Special Rapporteurs and other UN entities to voice repeated concerns about what the violence that has been perpetrated over the past 16 and 17 months. So this is a case, and one of the strategic directions is related to generalized violence. And what we witness in Gaza is not only generalized violence, but intentional systemic violence that is perpetrated against a population of refugees, to begin with, a predominantly refugee population, by an Israeli occupying state. So the state is an occupier. The state is the individuals who are being subjected to the violence of internal displacement are not citizens of that state. And the state is not, you know, does not hold itself accountable for any durable solutions for this population. And this raises questions about the limits of what the guiding principles or what any work on internal displacement or the rights of internally displaced persons in the coming years, the limits of that work when it doesn't acknowledge situations where occupying states are engaging in intentional and systemic acts to internally displace a population that they occupy. And also, if we think about the last couple of weeks as well, we are in a situation where the internally displaced are being pushed to become refugees, and the blurry line between internal displacement, cross-border displacement, and ethnic cleansing and war crimes. We are currently in a very difficult geopolitical context, and I would be very interested to hear back from Paula about what the Special Rapporteur or other UN agencies, in the context of withdrawing funding, of course, from the major funder, what possibilities there are in order to address basically this predicament that we are witnessing taking place in Palestine and specifically in Gaza. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Sawsan. It's very much a question that weighs on all of us. I see Meron's question in the Q&A box as well, very much around how we engage in this context of politicization. From Hiram and Abebaw's presentation, we hear about progress that's made around laws at the national and at the regional level and these standards. But what accountability is there when those standards are not acceded to or even subscribed to by the states that hold responsibility. So I think this is a central question. Before we get to the discussion, though, with the time that we have left, and thank you everyone for keeping to time, so we have 20 minutes for discussion. Houwayda, I'm keen to bring you into the conversation because your work in the context of Lebanon in looking at the experience of those displaced by violence and conflict, external aggression against Lebanon, coming from your perspective in social work, really sort of brings the perspective of those most directly affected by displacement and that experience. So it's my great pleasure to bring Professor Houwayda Matta into the conversation. Houwayda is the IDRC Research Chair in Forced Displacement at l'Université de Saint-Joseph in Beirut. Houwayda, please, the floor is yours, and you're also using a PowerPoint that will be shared now, and Houwayda's link is in bio is in the box. Houwayda, please, over to you.
Thank you so much, James. Thank you for the opportunity. I have prepared my presentation in English since I work in French. So please excuse maybe my errors during the presentation. We can begin, please, next slide. So hello, everyone. Today I will discuss the challenges and strategies related to reintegration or to return of internally displaced persons in Lebanon, focusing on the importance of sustainable partnership for addressing these challenges. To begin, it is essential to outline the specificities of internal displacement in Lebanon. This crisis in Lebanon began in October 2023 due to armed conflict between another party and Israel, escalating in September 2024. This forced a massive displacement of people, which continued until a ceasefire in late November 2024. In my presentation, I will examine two key phases in the management of this crisis. The phase one concerns the reception of IDPs in various regions. The phase two concerns the returns to the region of origin or nearby areas. Since it's a recent phenomenon in Lebanon, there aren't many completed studies yet. So as James said, I base my analysis on the experience of social workers who were part of the interministerial crisis cell established for this purpose and who accompanies the displaced person during the two aforementioned phases. The phase one, next slide, please. The state activated crisis cell to manage the influx, but its lack of preparedness and resources meant that armed party, particularly in politically dominated regions, played a significant role in managing the crisis. NGOs helped to fill gaps by providing essential services, but coordination with local authorities was lacking, leading to unequal distribution of resources. In the phase one, also, please, next slide, host community showed solidarity, but return was seen as the only solution after the conflict ended. Displaced persons also prioritized return with no long-term settlement plans. They actively prepared to return as soon as ceasefire announcements were made. And if we saw what one displaced woman said, I dream of the day I can turn the key in the door and go back home. Phase two. Next slide, please. The state had no plan for supporting the return of displaced persons, as the ceasefire decision was beyond its control. Two main reasons for the lack of planning were: one, the state's inability to organize or to stop the return, and two, its lack of resources to enforce decisions or provide alternatives. As a result, displaced persons were left without guidance or support. They returned without knowing if their homes were intact, with some finding them destroyed and others staying with relatives or in shelters. The Ministry of Social Affairs assessed needs in affected regions, but lacked a clear state plan. Consequently, he sought international support for return assistance. Minimal remedial actions were taken, with much of the responsibility falling on non-governmental organizations, who played a significant role in providing aid, offering financial, psychosocial, and educational support, as well as medical services, food, and clothing. The armed party conducted its own assessment, offering some housing compensations and financial assistance for repairs. Despite these efforts, basic living conditions in affected regions remained extremely poor and deplorable. Next slide, please. So we arrived to the conclusion. The state's limited capacity for reception and return, combined with the fragmented responses from armed groups and NGOs, has resulted in a lack of clear strategies for reintegration and long-term stability. While the Lebanese civil sector and international organizations are attempting to assist, budget cuts and the recent withdrawal of US aid have significantly worsened the situation. In this context, displaced persons are left in precarious conditions, confused about responsibilities amid a fragile state with failing governance. If I dare to speak about recommendations, so to strengthen the overall response, reconstruction plans, economic support, security measures are essential to ensure the safe integration of returnees. The state alone lacks the resources to manage and organize returns without external support. It is vital to develop frameworks that foster better coordination between state actors, international partners, humanitarian agencies, and local organizations. This leads us to pose crucial question to the international community: how to ensure the protection of displaced persons and safeguard their rights in countries like Lebanon, where local governance systems face significant gaps. And in such a context, how to implement sustainable solutions for the long-term stability of internally displaced population. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Houwayda. Merci beaucoup. I think the questions that you pose about a framework that's reliant on state authority in the context of limited state capacity or state fragility is an important question, but also this presumption about how the system of response that we have does have these presumptions about external support. And I think what we're all grappling with is at a time where that external support is cut. What do we do? So that we're left. I look at my water glass exactly at that moment, and it is exactly half full and half empty. We have these positive developments of a progression of laws in recent years at a national and a regional level, but then these examples where accountability, capacity, cooperation are becoming so constrained. So let's turn now to a time for discussion. And Paula, I'd like to come back to you. From these presentations, we hear on the one hand, the increase in availability of data, advances in terms of law at a regional and national level, a recognition of the issue, but yet the increased politicization of displacement, increased politicization in the cooperation that's needed to find solutions. So Paula, I'd be keen to begin our discussion with your reflections on what we have heard from the context of Ethiopia, Mexico, Gaza, Lebanon, on these questions of where we see opportunities for progress and your thoughts on overcoming these challenges. So Paula, let's come to you, and then we'll open it up with some questions from the audience and coming back to the chairs. Paula, over to you, please.
No, thank you, James, and thank you, everyone. It's been completely helpful and amazing for me. I'm just thinking ahead on future thematics for the next years. And one of the issues that I had in my mind was precisely the issue of returns. and the reconstruction finally of conditions for the people that that need to rebuild their lives. And you all have touched on those issues, so we might come back to those. A lot of bad experiences of forced returns and people that are left to their own how do you say in English, luck, without the government accompaniment. And obviously all the last week's great ideas of reconstructing Gaza without the self-determination element of it's the people that decide on their own future. But yeah, many great ideas. I just wanted to say thank you first. I just wanted to also share for Houwayda and Sawsan that this morning we issued the latest press statement with some colleagues from other special rapporteurs on the particular situation of Lebanon and the lack of respect for the ceasefire from Israel. And so just wanted to share that it's out there, and it's basically about the lack of respect to civilians and their protection, and all the harm that it's causing on their homes, their lands, and obviously the need for compensation, reparations of property, etc. But it's much in line with what Houwayda you were saying here. So I'll try to share it if by the end of the conversation, or I'll share it to you, James. I also wanted to thank very much the inputs from Ethiopia, because this is basically what we have seen. And when you share your comments, Abebaw, I just think of Colombia. I mean, there's so many resemblances between Ethiopia and Colombia, and you make me think about the importance of obviously local authorities and all these good local initiatives, the Somali region and everything that they came up with, this very important solutions plan. It's as you say, a 4 or 5 year plan, 5-year plan with resources, with a vision, with everyone on board, which looks like a very much political will invested. And I've seen, and that's another thing that maybe I didn't mention at the beginning as a vision and a strong focus I want to have this year and the coming years, a focus and a stronger relationship with local authorities. I think we leave them behind. We don't relate to them a lot, but those are the people that are taking the decisions, the big decisions about the internally displaced persons' realities, more than the national governments, no? So dedicating more time to work with them, and most of the times what I have seen is that they have much more political will than national governments. It's not that I'm saying don't work with national governments, but as we saw in Mexico, the Chiapas, the other I think there's already 4 local laws, and we don't have a national, a federal national law that we're looking for in the past years. It has been impossible to come up with one, but we do have that political will at the local level. The other thing I wanted to mention is the importance of the host communities. I've heard from many internally displaced persons and host communities about the very strong social cohesion and social solidarity, I would say, and we see that, as you mentioned, in Ethiopia, very strong, which I think we have to look more to those. Also, the perspectives of those peace processes that are not that take a lot of attention at the beginning, but then they kind of fade out the attention, And that's part of my report to the General Assembly about peace processes and the big opportunity that they have to work also on solutions for IDPs and to address root causes of those drivers of displacement. And in the case of Ethiopia, also the need to strengthen the attention on how to complete like the commitments around those IDPs peace process that is there. And finally, the recommendations you give about the genuine political dialogue and the importance to have at the center of the political will at national level the IDPs. I think it's going to be a continuous challenge for Ethiopia, and it's going to be also part of my priorities as a mandate holder for the country. Data, obviously, and I'm also as Houwayda was saying or Sawsan was saying about jealousy of having all those data that Hiram was crossing up, and I will love to continue the engagement with you and the University of Guadalajara, because our next report is basically on this, the violence caused by this criminal organized crime. And as you picture the cartel's presence in Mexico, it's like I was trying to see where they are not present, no? And there was like this really only this white part of Mexico with no presence of the cartels, no? So, and this is the situation in other countries of the region. And I've heard not cartels necessarily, but other organized crime in parts of Nigeria, for example, obviously the case of Haiti, and the lack of protection, responses, and engagement from the government to really respond to this very destructive and this is the type of violence that is creating the most deaths in the world, more than conflicts. So this is a violence and obviously displacement. So this is something that I want to engage with more. I really want to thank Sawsan for her kind words and for taking the time to go over the report. This is so useful and encouraging for me and for us. I think it's very important. I think it's very important what you mentioned about the elements of sovereignty that comes with responsibility of the states to protect their population. And this was a big discussion in the high-level panel, discussion around, because in the high-level panel, if you reread it, the main aspect of how things we're going to shift to a real response for IDPs is the political will. And the big question that we asked ourselves is what happens when the governments are the responsibles of the displacement. And you picture, in this case, the occupying power of Israel with Gaza is like the best example. And I recommend you reading my press statement from December 20th or 19th last year, 24, where I stated all the situations where Israel contradicted its wording, that they were saying that in the evacuation orders and everything that they were doing, they were trying to protect the civil population. And I just mentioned every case where they were doing completely the opposite, and how they were violating all their obligations as an occupying power, because I understand all the differences that you're mentioning, but in IHL, obviously, you know that they have these obligations as occupying powers of protecting the civil population that they haven't done. They've done the opposite, and I say that in that report. Yes, I think that I'll stop. So, sorry.
Yeah, and
Paula, I can stay talking, and we need to hear everyone. Yeah,
I know, no, and just for everyone's benefit, we've posted the link to that statement from December, and also the report from February that was issued. So those links and a link to the high level panels report, all of those for the audience is there online. And this is
thank you.
obviously a conversation that can consume careers, unfortunately. And you mentioned the protracted nature of displacement. There's a question that Megan Bradley has posed in the Q&A box, and Megan, who has been doing exceptional work on internal displacement with many colleagues and leading very exciting efforts, raises this question about the utility or the extent to which the IDP label or category is used and has use. That in countries like Colombia, Megan writes, that many people forced from their homes have organized themselves around this concept of IDP. But does that concept have utility in Hiram, in a context like Mexico, Abebaw in Ethiopia, and Houwayda, for example, in Lebanon? Does using the category IDP have utility in thinking about a shared experience or a shared claim for protection standards that we see, for example, in laws? So I'd be keen to hear, Hiram, from you, and Abebaw, Sawsan, and Houwayda. Sawsan, you mentioned, the artificiality of the distinction between refugee and IDP in the context of Gaza, in the context of generations of displacement. So, thoughts from you to the chairs on where and how this category or label of IDP is useful, or is it something that doesn't have currency or meaning in the contexts where you work? Hiram, can we start with you, and then Abebaw, Sawsan, and Houwayda with just short interventions before we go to the next question? Hiram, to begin with you, please.
Thank you, James. Just I would like to do two clarification of my presentation. First, the general law on internal displacement has not been approved by the lower house of the legislative power. So this is a big limit for the policies for try this group. But in the local level, in other states, Chiapas, Michoacán, and Sinaloa, we have 3 local laws. This is very important because if you know about the legal, we are design the policies, the legal laws, no? Or the laws design the policies. And the other clarification is that the chair, or we use the information that is coming from the National Institute of Geography, Statistics, and Informatics, particularly the national census in 2020. This is important because one of the principal problems with the IDPs is the information. The information is not clear, so all the time we need to build this information. This is the main effort from the chair to find a way to build information, because with the presently information is easiest to design policies or particular actions. Just is all that I to say. Thank you very much, James. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Hiram. And just to quickly follow up, it is specifically in the context of those fleeing organized criminal activity. Does the term, given these developments, does the term internally displaced person, does it have resonance or meaning? Do people think of themselves as IDPs in the Mexican context? I'm just keen on that before we move to Abebaw in the context of Ethiopia.
Yes, so all the time is thinking about the criminal associations or cartels.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Hiram. Abebaw, in your context in Ethiopia, in the field work that you're conducting right now with communities that have been displaced, does that category, does that term of IDP, does it have meaning, or do they organize themselves in around other concepts or principles?
I think within themselves and with the state, there are differences the way it's conceptualized. States and different bodies often recognize only those who are in camps, IDP camps. But there are a lot of people who are living, getting shelter from family, from friends, from other networks. These are not recognized and they are not getting the support, but these people, take themselves as IDP, but they are not given attention because the focus is more on humanitarian assistance and IDP setting, and they have to be genuine more for kind of image saving. Having when you have so many people together in a camp, and when you don't do something, then that has image. Either you have to return them or you have to do something. Then governments and different bodies take this as IDPs, but the communities, they are so dispersed, and a lot of them are dispersed, and this group are not taken as IDP, but they take themselves as IDPs and demand to be returned their land, their resources, or those they lost, or to be relocated. If I have got the point or the question well.
Yeah, no, and I think that's quite an important point about how, on the one hand, categories are artificial constructions, but yet they have meaning when it comes to accessing resource services. And Sawsan, to your point, in the context of Gaza, the distinction between a Palestinian refugee, internally displaced, it's this cycle of displacement. But have you found that category, that terminology, has meaning or utility in the context, Sawsan?
This is an interesting question. It's an open question. I really, I mean, I believe that the refugee identity is very strong. Because there's always been, for more than 75 years, this idea that that there has to be a right of return. People have to return. So I think, I mean, but it would be interesting to look at this in the context of the recent developments in the last year and a half or so, where the refugees have become internally displaced, and maybe they're talking about returning to where they were, like 1 or 2 kilometers away, rather than where they came from, their grandparents came from 75 years ago. So it would be interesting to explore this. I know that in the context of Lebanon, the term displaced is salient, and even the refugees are referred to as displaced people rather than refugees. So I wonder, maybe Houwayda can address this. But what I can say before turning to Houwayda is that the drive for return is extremely strong, to the point that people don't wait. People know that the government, will not help, and there are no resources. They return anyways. So I think that's something that it would be interesting to think about in the context of Lebanon and the context of Gaza as well.
So thank you. And so Houwayda, to you, I mean, again, in the displacement, in the cycles of displacement in Lebanon.
I think that the most used concept in Lebanon is a displaced person, not necessarily an internally displaced person. And this concept is not recent Lebanon. It dates back to the Lebanese war that began in 1975, during which large-scale displacement occurred from different affected regions. But the return was gradually facilitated through reconciliation interventions in that time. The difference today lies in the rapid speed of displacement and return, as Sawsan said. In both cases, host community and displaced individual perceive internally displaced persons as displaced persons. And I think, I don't know if Sawsan agree, that the concept displaced person is used to distinguish the person who are displaced internally in Lebanon from refugees who come from other countries, such the Syrian or the Palestinians.
No, thank you, Houwayda. And I think, you know, as a way of bringing us to conclusion, it really sort of points to how problematic and how easily we're tempted to take very episodic understandings of the phenomenon of displacement, as opposed to, you know, these generational or inherited identities of displaced communities that have been displaced for generations. How these labels, these categories function, have meaning. Opportuna Kweka, who is the chair, the IDRC Research Chair at the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, just posted in the Q&A box that these categories have meaning if they have value in terms of being able to access resources and forms of support. As we're coming up to time, Paula, I'd love to give a last word to you. We've only just begun the conversation of the complexity from these various contexts where the chairs are working. But I'd love to hear your final thoughts, Paula, in terms of in the work that you do. You are very public in your appreciation of the value of connecting with IDP-led initiatives, with researchers and advocates in the context where displacement happens, to grapple with these complexities and to move beyond simple narratives. So, Paula, a last thought from you on the importance of ensuring that these perspectives are amplified in the global context where you're working and seeking to have impact, especially at this time where, you know, questions of displacement and responses are so politicized and constrained by geopolitics. Paula, just a final word from you before we conclude, please.
No, thank you, James, and everyone. And I think this exchange today shows the value of research, of exchanges of knowledge. It's about people that are suffering, have suffered for ages. It's a reality that's still there. There's less. I mean, as the numbers increase, as much as there are 51 or more frameworks and laws on internal displacement around the world, as you mentioned already, people are still suffering and have no solutions at side. So it's a valid issue to keep on working. I think collective thinking is what we need. I sometimes feel in this place, I think it's a lonely place being a special rapporteur, because you have all these challenges ahead, and the only way to address them is by working with others that have already been doing this for a long time, that are in touch with the reality, that are in touch with IDPs, NGOs, that are in touch with, because I also think that we need to involve them much more. We need to hear them much more in this type of exchanges that we did with McGill, as you mentioned, because they are the ones that have the best ideas. That's the other thing, you know, they know better what's suits them best. So I think the public policies also need more evidence, not only data, but analysis. We need to be creative, because also, and me, coming from also experiences in the government, I was in the government for 6-7 years. And policymakers and government need creative ideas, because there's not enough resources, and reparations and rebuilding people's lives is expensive, but it's worth it. And that's why we try to say in the high level panel, it's an investment. It's not only an obligation, it's a human rights obligation, it's a moral obligation, but it's an investment. It's an investment, and IDPs can also contribute to improve the life of the community, as we see they do in Ukraine, as we see they do in Ethiopia, as we see they do in Sudan with the community kitchens, as we see they have done in Gaza, in Lebanon. So we need to be there for them. And you count on me. That will be my last message. I'm a channel. You know, I'm here for some years, and I would like to for you to use me in the better sense possible to put at a higher level in terms of recommendations, in terms of awareness, all the research that you have been doing for so many years. So you count on me, and I hope that I can count also on you to make the life better of all these people that need us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paula. And I think, you know, that note of the importance of connection, solidarity, exchange, and collaboration is so important, including with those who themselves have experienced displacement and organized themselves, are always the first at the front line of responding. And we see that in so many contexts and have so much knowledge and expertise to share. So as part of a community to respond, I think your call for collaboration and solidarity is well heard. Let me just say, by means of conclusion, that this is the mandate of the network of IDRC Research Chairs. We'll put a link in the chat box now if you want to know more about what the chairs are mandated to do. 12 chairs across the Global South who are conducting research and are committed to contributing to discourse, to amplifying these perspectives of Global South, where the vast majority of the world's displaced people are to be found, to amplify that knowledge, that expertise into these global conversations, to shift the narrative in a way that can contribute to solutions. So my sincere thanks to you, Paula, and your team in making time for this dialogue. To Sawsan, Houwayda, Hiram, Abebaw, thank you very much for your time and your expertise. My sincere thanks to all colleagues who joined us on the call, and a special thanks to Jadukson, to Nadia, to Shuchi, to everyone working behind the scenes to make this happen. Keep an eye on the website of the IDRC Research Chairs and the handle on Twitter. Montserrat and Shuchi are working already on a policy brief that will come out of this conversation, and Jadukson will be working to edit the video and posting that soon on YouTube. We've received about 15 centimeters of snow in the hour and a half that we've been online. So I'm going to go outside and shovel some snow so that we can get out of the house. But let me just say a sincere thanks to everyone for the time, for your reflections. Wherever you're joining us from, stay well and stay safe. And thank you for your engagement with this important conversation. Thank you, everyone. Merci beaucoup. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Gracias.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Welcome. Bye-bye.